welcome to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Mark Elridge. I'm Lorna Vigili, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Dr. Keisha Davis, the county's health officer, as well as Mr. Sean O'Donnell from the Department of Health and Human Services. Today, we have a couple of special guests, including Council President Mr. Evan Glass and Council Member Kate Stewart. They're both here to talk about the AAA bond rating that the county just received. And also joining us today is Jessie Mejia, who is our county's Latino liaison out of the Office of Community Partnerships. And she's here to talk about Hispanic Heritage Month celebrations in Montgomery County. Mr. County Executive, good morning to you. And let's get started.
Good morning, and a beautiful morning it is. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're going to start our media briefing this week with some really great news from Montgomery County. We earned a AAA bond rating from all three credit rating agencies, Fitch, Moody, and Standard & Poor's. It's our 34th year of AAAs and over 50 years since our first AAA rating. So it maintains a really important milestone for county government. The AAA rating means that the county is the top rated issuer of municipal bonds. And what that means is there are only roughly 50 counties out of more than 3,000 that have this rating, and it lets us borrow money for capital improvements by selling long-term bonds at the most favorable interest rates, which saves taxpayers money and allows us to spend more to meet our needs, like schools, recreation centers, libraries, and transit, as opposed to spending more money on interest. So this is really important for the kind of things we try to do, and getting this again is really satisfying. It's more important now even than in recent years, because as we see, the higher interest rates on the market right now drive up the cost of borrowing, and that of course drives up the cost of all projects. I will say that one of the good things, and the counties practice this pretty regularly, that even when we've had to issue bonds in higher interest rate periods, we've been fortunate in my time that the interest rate's been pretty low, but we've been able to refinance existing bonds when interest rates drop. So I think the good news long-term is even if you had to borrow at a slightly higher interest rate, as rates drop, the county often gets opportunities to refinance back down to more reasonable rates. This was the fifth bond rating review process that I've been through, and I want to thank Council President Glass and Council Member Stewart for also participating in this review process, and we're going to hear from them soon. But it was clear that all the rating agencies were highly impressed with the county's financials and were very complimentary and confident about our fundamentals, revenues, reserves, and our overall economic stability. Each of the rating agencies had pretty positive words about our county. And here's just one from Standard & Poor's. It's one of my favorites because it says, the ratings reflected our view that the county's affluent, broad, and diverse economic base located adjacent to Washington, D.C., with very strong wealth and income indicators, a sophisticated management team with comprehensive set of formalized financial policies and practices. My own, overview of the presentation we did is, we're able to go in and have questions answered before they get asked. So the comprehensiveness of what we put in front of the rating agencies is helpful because people don't feel like they've got to poke and prod to get answers to things. We kind of lay everything out there, and I think that's beneficial to us. In addition to the run of AAA bond ratings, we've also seen some positive economic signs in other forms as well. This month, we again matched our 33-year low in unemployment numbers, and the July figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show Montgomery County's jobless rate remains at 1.5, which matches June's numbers and is tied for the lowest unemployment marks in Montgomery County since 1990. And it's the first time we've been able to hold unemployment this low for 2 straight months. The record low occurred even as nationwide unemployment rates rose slightly from 3.5 to 3.8%. But I will say that, part of rising was actually for good reason. More workers decided again to try to re-enter the workforce. I think for a while, people were facing dried up jobs, not a lot of opportunities. And as opportunities to get hired have opened up, more people have, re-entered the workforce. And so the uptick has less to do with an unemployment problem and more to do probably with more people thinking they can get jobs and being out in the market. And sometimes that means you're unemployed for a while, but at least you're seeking work. We're also seeing benefits in our policies over the last several years because we've been very aggressively courting new companies who are eager to grow and expand. And courting here means more than just going and have a meeting and say, we'd like you to come here. We've reassured companies and worked with companies to get them a level of comfort that if they do come here, the kind of reputational issues that the county runs into sometimes, we've been able to address many of them. So we've been able to make sure that people are able to proceed, particularly in the life sciences, in a reasonable amount of time. And also we've been flexibly modifying codes, as have many other places in the country, to adapt to the new state of science. I mean, there was a time when you weren't doing lab work or anything above, I think it was the third floor. And now you're getting taller buildings in which you have science on all the floors. And there was a point in time when that just wasn't happening, but it's happening now. And we've worked with our permitting department to make sure that we're in line with the kind of changes that have been made elsewhere in the country. We're also seeing the life sciences community grow from the fourth largest to the nation's third. And we have around 4 million square feet of lab space has either been built or is under development right now since I became county executive. And I think we started with somewhere around 6 million square feet of lab space. So that's a pretty significant growth. And all of that's important to the development of life sciences. Lab space provides the testing ground for companies that need to be able to find out whether the products they're working on, the drugs they're trying to develop, are going to be effective. So we are in a much better position than we were 4 or 5 years ago, and we intend to keep improving on that. And in other big news, the University of Maryland Board of Regents Finance Committee voted to take the next step toward establishing the Institute for Health Computing in Montgomery County with a long-term lease in Rockville. The Institute will harness the power of artificial intelligence and big data and bring it to bear on health computing that adds a new dimension to efforts to develop treatments, track health outcomes, and address health disparities. So for people who are looking for the concrete sign that this is now happening, we now have a concrete sign. In fact, we've got a concrete building that the university is going to be moving their program into. I appreciate the committee's support. Look forward to a positive vote from the board on the 22nd and formally celebrating after that. This institute is really going to, and it really is creating a buzz among life sciences companies. We know the University of Maryland medical system has actually brought on an economic development person to help recruit companies who want to be there, and they feel pretty good about the responses they're getting from companies who are very interested in associating themselves with the combination of AI, big data, and health data. When I was in Taiwan with their technology businesses and leaders, they were also very interested in what we're trying to create in North Bethesda. And the Institute of Health Computing is a key to being able to take our region's life science cluster from being third to number one. It's an ambitious goal, but I think it's an achievable goal. This project isn't just good for Montgomery County, but for the entire state of Maryland. I look forward to continuing our conversation with Governor Moore's administration, our General Assembly leaders, about state investment needed during the General Assembly session. I also want to add, we talk about this a lot as a life sciences thing, and it is an institute for health computing, but it's anchored in work in artificial intelligence and big data and machine learning. And so it's going to have benefits for other industries as well. So we're going to get more than one benefit out of this project. Finally, the key sectors of Montgomery County's tourism industry have surpassed or moving back toward pre-pandemic levels. There have been steady increases in spending, hotel occupancy rates, and hotel tax collections, along with state sales and use taxes. So as we begin our FY25 budget deliberations, I'm confident that our financials of our finances are good economic news, and the indicators are healthy. One of the other advantages Montgomery County has is that our tax system is based on, 2 feet, the property tax foot and the income tax foot. Some other jurisdictions around us are based more or less on one foot. They're property taxes without income taxes locally. And so they're much more dependent on the property tax sector for their fiscal well-being. And one of the things that happened last year was that despite downturns, we all know about the lack of recordation tax because people weren't, transferring property. But on the other hand, our income taxes have been pretty healthy and helped us buffer last year by providing, a reasonable increase that kept us from being hurt badly by the downturn. And hopefully that continues again this year. But there is a lot to be said for diversity of financial resources. I want to thank our finance office and our Office of Management and Budget, as well as the County Council, for their hard work and partnership to achieve this AAA once again, and their efforts to continue to propel our county's economy forward. I'm going to turn it over now to Council President Glass and Councilmember Stewart for their comments.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. County Executive. I appreciate those comments, and also want to extend my appreciation to the finance team and everybody else who works on these finance issues day in and day out. The AAA bond rating signifies that Montgomery County is among the most fiscally responsible local governments in the country, and we should all be very proud of that. The county achieved this rating through strategic long-term fiscal management, combined with key investments in economic development opportunities, which is really going to continue to grow our tax base and strengthen our economy. And these investments will allow us to invest even more in our schools, libraries, recreation centers, and public transportation. There were some questions, to be honest, about whether or not we'd be able to maintain this AAA bond rating, especially over the last few months as we worked through the recent budget. But through the council's hard work, we were able to make considerable cost savings while adding a historic number of resources to our public schools and our healthcare system. And we should all be incredibly proud of that. Finalizing the county's $6.7 billion operating budget was an act of fiscal discipline and a reflection of our moral values, and that has turned into AAA bond ratings from 3 credit rating agencies. So I'm pleased that all of our collective hard work has turned into this result, and we will continue working together and collaboratively to make sure that we have AAA bond ratings for the years to come. And with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Stewart, the chair of the Government Operations Committee.
Great. Thank you, President Glass and County Executive Eldridge. As chair of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, I was glad to participate in the meetings with our rating agencies and thrilled to receive the reports that we did. As the county exec pointed to one of his favorite quotes from the report, I'd like to highlight mine. One of the agencies stated they view the county's financial resilience as superior, reflecting a combination of solid expenditure flexibility, demonstrated cost-cutting in response to weakened revenues, and timely adjustments to revenue projections, which have resulted in consistent reserve levels through the economic cycle. And again, as Council President Glass noted, this was a collaborative effort that we all worked together, the county executive, the council. And I also want to note that all 3 rating agencies highlighted our excellent finance staff, and that we could not do all this work without them. And I want to thank them personally for all their effort. Over the last 3 years, Montgomery County has taken important steps to manage the well-being of our residents and the county's fiscal health through the global pandemic. Specifically, this last year was a transitional year. We saw federal funding recede. We had a new county council, and Montgomery County continued, even with these challenges we faced, continued positive stewardship and fiscal management to retain our AAA bond rating. And as has been said, this designation provides our county with advantages by lowering the cost of our debt and enables us to take on credit needed to continue to make important investments in our community. I'm proud of the work we've engaged in and will continue to do so, and our long history of being rated among the best local governments across our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stewart, Council President Glass. Members of the media, we're going to open it up right now for the Q&A portion of this presentation. If you have any questions regarding the AAA bond rating, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. I'll give you a second or two to get activated. Questions regarding the AAA bond rating received by the county? No questions? Going once, twice? All righty then. Thank you, Councilmember Stewart, Council President Glass, for joining us today. You can remain on the call or you can jump off. Maybe you have something else to do. Thank you so much for joining us today. Mr. County Executive.
Thank you. And thank you guys for joining us today. It's really helpful to have multiple perspectives here. This past Sunday, I attended the Festival Salvadoreno, and this annual celebration drew thousands of people to Montgomery County Fairgrounds. And it was the kickoff to Hispanic Heritage Month, which runs from September 15th to October 15th. It begins September 15th because it's the anniversary of independence for El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Nicaragua. All these countries won their independence from Spain at the same time. And during the same week, Mexico and Chile also celebrate their independence days. So we're a county where 1 in 5 residents are of Hispanic or Latino descent. 40% of our foreign-born population are from Latin America and South American countries. And many of our Latino residents have been here for generations, and others are new arrivals to our nation, and all are respected, welcomed, and embraced here. And I can attest to the many generations thing, because when I was at Kenny Hills Elementary School, and my 6th grade teacher was Mr. Garcia. So that was, was a normal part of the fabric of the county for a long time. As county executive, I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue the work that our government, and I want to acknowledge the work that former CE County Ike Leggett did toward creating a more inclusive and welcoming county. These were deliberate decisions that people have made over time, that we were not just going to accept that people were coming here, but we were going to make sure that they had the kind of experiences and opportunities that they needed to have. And I think it's one reason why we find a lot of people, from many different cultures feeling like they can come to Montgomery County and be welcome here. Part of this increasing diversity also includes increasing, diversity within the county government so that it's more reflective of the communities we serve. And we're also seeking a lot of growth we're also seeing a lot of growth in our county government's Facebook and Espanol page, where we share all of the latest news and information about county happenings in Spanish. So there are many events this month celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, including cultural celebrations and educational programming, as well as new business highlights, community conversations, and the launch of new informative series for economic development. I had the privilege of speaking to the Hispanic Chambers this morning, and we talked about economic development, and that Montgomery County has become a lot more inclusive in who we contract with. This last year, we had more new vendors. They were the majority of vendors that got contracts within Montgomery County. So it's good to see that the efforts to bring more people into our contracting space are paying off. And there are, like I said, a lot of events that are going to be available this month, and I'm going to turn it over to our county's Latino liaison, Jesse Mejia, to talk more about the upcoming events and celebrations in our county. So Jesse, it's all yours.
Thank you. Buenos dias. Thank you, County Executive. As you mentioned, Montgomery County is celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month with many more public engagements than ever before this year. Cultural celebrations, educational programming, and community conversations are scheduled across the county throughout the month. We will have regional concerts, local festivities, new business highlights, community conversations with a celebrated author, and the launch of a new informative online series aiming to spur business and economic development for folks wanting to start their business here in Montgomery County. This increased engagement is possible with collaborations between different county entities and community partners, including our regional service offices, business development team, Montgomery County Public Libraries, Department of Environmental Protection, REC, HHS, Board of Elections, and many others. We want to thank our community partners that are working with us in different communities to bring these celebrations close to our families. Some of the highlights include the TGIF Encore, a free concert series of the Marian Friar Wheaton Plaza every Friday during the month. Local neighborhood festivities at Germantown and Long Branch. New business highlights in Silver Spring and Bethesda. A month-long social media spotlight on county employees, a community conversation entirely in Spanish regarding our fiscal year 25 operating budget, and the launch of a new economic development virtual series by Montgomery County Public Libraries, Everything I-10. Rockville Library will also be hosting a contemporary conversation with celebrated author, Dr. Tony Medina, on October 11th. So lots happening. There will be virtual calendars made available for each region of the different events happening. These will be available Friday, the September 15th. Look for those calendars in our county's websites, social media platforms, including our Spanish Facebook page, Montgomery County en Español. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you at some of these events.
We will.
So
Thank you. Let's open it up, Mr. County Executive, for any questions regarding Hispanics Heritage Month. Members of the media, this is a time to ask questions regarding all events that are planned throughout the county. Please raise your hand if you'd like to ask any questions to the County Executive and or Ms. Jessie Mejia. Questions regarding Hispanic Heritage Month? Okay, going once, twice. No question. Thanks, Ms. Mejia, for joining us this morning. You can stay here on the call, or you can drop off if you need to. Mr. County Executive, public health update and other topics.
More things to come. So first I want to turn it over. Before I turn it over to the HHS team, I want to talk about a couple of other items and put on your radar. First, the other night I rode along with with a police officer in the Silver Spring district, and I was on the beat that covered downtown Silver Spring, and while it was a relatively quiet night in downtown Silver Spring, the time I got to talk to the officers was incredibly valuable. We actually talked after roll call for almost an hour about issues they're facing and how they see their job, what they think they need, and get a sense of what they think we're doing right, and continued issues with where they see room for improvement. I got to hear firsthand the challenges that they face with staffing, and it's you have to do something like a ride along to really appreciate it. They had 9 folks going out that night on the shift we were on, and so 5 of them were basically deployed to downtown Silver Spring, and 4 were covering basically the rest of the county, from White Oak up to Burtonsville, from I-95 over to Randolph Road. That is an enormous amount of territory for 4 people to cover, and it kind of reminds us. They told me that their peak levels of staffing used to be much higher, and they're not able to put out the people on the road that they really need to put out, and it's complicated by an issue we're having with the contractor who's supposed to fix their cars. We have had horrible delays and really extended periods of time before the contractor is returning vehicles to service, and it's really impacting the officers. And we are, looking to deal with the contractor, because this is not an acceptable way to manage that contract. I think you get a better sense of the impacts when you actually have a firsthand view of what the officers are doing on their beats. I'd say most people were pretty polite, and it was from what I saw a largely peaceful evening. But I had a few hours in a microcosm of the county, They underscored that some of the decisions we made in terms of bonuses and pay and expanded recruitment efforts have had an impact in both getting officers to stay and also attracting officers. But we need more proposals to try to address the size of our force. And we'll be going to the council with, the projections of where the force is heading and things we need to do that I think would better protect the residents of the county in the immediate future. So more to come on that. They did get to hear some of my concerns, and they answered questions about what they were dealing with, because I was trying to get a better understanding of, when we asked them to do things in Silver Spring, how do they view doing that? And to be frank, there are times when the officers are pretty significantly outnumbered by people, and it's challenging to work in that environment. I know that, in some of the issues we talked about, they're probably surprised by some of my positions on things, because I do share some concerns about, things that have been done in the name of having a nightlife, and whether allowing those things to occur as they are right now is actually an impediment to public safety. So we've introduced some new legislation that we're going to be looking at how we deal with the nightlife folks going forward. But I just want to reassure the officers and the community that if the stuff we introduce doesn't deal with this problem, we're going to deal with it another way. We're not just going to fold up our tents and say, oh, well, can't solve it, because there's a way we can solve it. We just have to be willing to do it. So hopefully the business owners down there understand we're serious. And if they want to keep doing some of the things they're doing, they're going to have to make sure that they're operating their businesses in a way that doesn't cause problems for the community. I learned a lot from engaging and talking with these officers. I feel like in general, since many people who are in administrative positions don't really do day-to-day work, talking to people who do the jobs we ask them to do day-to-day often provides insights that you just don't see from where you sit. And so I really encourage our managers to engage with the workforce, and it was certainly helpful for me to have had this opportunity to talk with the police officers. Another issue coming up, our FY25 budget community conversations begin this week, and we're going to be doing, I think, a total of 10 conversations. And this is the time we focus on the FY25 capital and operating budget process. Our first community conversations about the upcoming budget will be tomorrow evening at the Mid-County Community Recreation Center. And this year we've increased the number of budget forums from 8 to 10 in order to be more inclusive. It includes a budget conversation in Spanish that'll be held next week, as well as ones in Chinese and Amharic later this fall. And we'll also be holding separate budget forums that are specifically for seniors, as well as for the county PTA. We hold these community conversations to give people a chance to be heard and voice their concerns, and also give us ideas for where they think we should be spending money or not spending money. The ideas and feedback we hear is going to help shape our decisions and our priorities for the next fiscal year. So, we started when I came into practice of doing the community discussions before we did the budget, as opposed to after we did the budget. I think this is helpful. And, we have folks from, OMB who attend these. So we're all getting a sense of what kind of concerns are out there in the community. The budget not only reflects the county's needs and concerns, but also our community's values and goals. And these conversations mark the beginning of this process, not the end. And I asked the media to help us promote these forums, but also attend yourselves. I mean, the best way to hear what's going on here is to hear from folks who turn out at these events and, want us to know what their concerns are and what they're thinking about. There's a small group of noisy people, but the noisy people don't actually represent the bulk of the residents of this county. The world does not turn around their one industry. And so, serving the needs of this county are a lot more complex. I encourage residents to participate in these conversations because their voices are going to help shape our path forward. And finally, on the health update, you can see from the chart on the screen that our hospitalization numbers are up, and these numbers are always the ones that concern me the most. We're all over 5 times higher this week than we were just 2 months ago. We're still not at pandemic levels during the worst of it, which is the good news. But these are the numbers you want to be concerned about. As long as COVID stays mild and people don't wind up in hospitals, particularly don't wind up in ICUs, and ultimately don't wind up dying, COVID is, manageable in one way. And if you see, a great increase in intensity of infections and more ICU use and more deaths, then you need to manage COVID a different way. But right now, the way we're managing it, I think is working reasonably well. I notice more and more people masking when they're out in public places. That's not a bad idea, particularly if you're in one of the vulnerable groups, like somebody like me who's a senior and has diabetes. I probably should be more masked when I go into a crowded room than other people should be. I got my flu shot. I think it was yesterday. It's all blur, but I think it was yesterday. And I'll be getting my COVID booster when it comes out. And I'm going to say this again. I say this a million times. That, the boosters that we took for COVID are waning. Their efficacy declines the farther away you get from that shot. And so getting a booster is critically important to maintain the protection it gave us. If we like where we sit right now and like the lack of severity and prevalence of the disease, or the mildness of it at the very least, then remember you got here because you got a shot. And so keep taking these shots. We happily take flu shots every year. We should happily take this shot as long as this virus is out there. It's, and I've said this before, there is no reason for anybody to die. This is something that if you're boosted and you're taken care of, you're not going to be facing the worst consequences of COVID. And so it's an easy way to avoid impacts that are going to be problematic. With these numbers increasing week after week, that we need everyone who's eligible to get the new shots, and they were just approved this week. On Monday, the FDA approved new COVID-19 vaccine that protects against the current strains that are circulating. Yesterday, CDC's advisory committee recommended anyone aged 6 months and older should get the new vaccine. And vaccines are going to start to be distributed to healthcare providers and pharmacies across the US in the next few days. And the big difference in this rollout is that insurance companies are going to pay for the vaccinations, and shots will primarily be available through private physicians' offices and local pharmacies. So the county is not going to have to mount the mass vaccination program. We're not going to have huge lines of people queued up to get through a few vaccine centers in the county. The vaccines are going to be widely available at pharmacies and in doctors' offices. So you'll be able to treat this like going in for any other shot. You don't stand in long lines, for most of these things. And this will be carried out in a way that I think everybody will find more comfortable and normal. And like most other health departments around the state, the county clinics are going to be more focused on the uninsured individuals. Our residents should contact their healthcare provider or visit vaccines.gov to search by zip code for local pharmacies offering the vaccinations. And like I said, you can see a picture. This is me getting the flu shot. I will tell you, I do not like shots, but this was no big deal. And I'm 1 day after the flu shot. Now all I've got is like tiny bit of soreness in my arm, but no side effects, no ill effects, no nothing. So I feel fine. Those of you who are over 60 like me, it's recommended to get the RSV vaccine. So I guess I'll be visiting Kaiser soon to get my RSV. And then in a couple of weeks, I'll get my booster. We're entering a time of year when people are spending more time indoors. And as the holidays approach, people are going to be doing a lot more socializing. We're going to be in larger group gatherings. It's a good idea to get these shots as soon as they're available to you, so you can relax a little bit more as you go through the holiday season. And, getting the recommended vaccinations not only protects the recipient, but most importantly, it protects those who are at high risk for complications and more serious illness from these respiratory infections. So if you're less concerned about yourself, but if you're around elderly or people who have compromised immune systems or otherwise are compromised by illnesses, get the shot for them. It'll help you, but it'll also make sure that you're not responsible for spreading it to someone else in the event you don't get the vaccine and you wind up getting COVID. So all that said, I'm going to turn this over now to our HHS team for their update.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. So I just would like to share with you a little bit of additional surveillance information. Again, our federal partners are updating the typing of the different variants that are going around. I'm sharing this with you. These are all Omicron variants that we're seeing across the country. Most of these are related to the XBB strain, and these are substrains of XBB. And this is what the new COVID vaccine has been formulated to protect against. When we look at our wastewater surveillance, we see the orange lines are showing you the parts per million that we see in our wastewater from surveillance. It's showing continued high amounts of COVID in the wastewater. Not surprising, the blue is showing the clinical cases that are identified through PCR testing. So you can see the correlation between these. The test positivity, this is across the state of Maryland, has, after rising for several weeks, has sort of plateaued. That can be it's still, a relatively higher percentage than what we saw earlier in the year, but at least it's not continuing to increase. And you can see here the test positivity in the upper right by county. You see Montgomery County has started to plateau as well. On the left, you can see the case rates per 100,000. These are the 7-day averages for 1 day. Excuse me. And you can see from previous weeks, these have gone up across the state. Ours was about 4 last week. It's now up to 6.16. And then we usually multiply that by 7 to get our 7-day average. Our hospital beds have gone up, as the county executive showed. We have an increase of acute care beds. This is a 1-day snapshot. We do look at this day to day, but our acute care occupancy went up by 17 since the previous Monday, and up by 7 to ICU. Now, when we look at our emergency department data, you can see the age groups where we're seeing more of our COVID patients are mostly 18 and above. But we're starting to see some of those at the younger ages as well. And then the lower data is showing the discharge diagnosis from our emergency departments. The left box is showing the COVID-specific diagnosis. The center is showing the influenza diagnosis. You see very, very low levels there. And we're starting to see with RSV on the right, we're starting to see a little bit of activity, which is not surprising. It usually happens around this time of year. Our overall emergency department volume is, apologies, it's slowly creeping up. They're getting a little bit busier as we're seeing more of these respiratory diseases result in people needing more care through an emergency department. And then statewide, you can see I've shared in the upper right the previous week's totals, 266 patients with a COVID diagnosis. That has risen to 291 across the state. And you can see the statewide has also had an increase in the ICU patients compared to the previous week. And then I just want to, again, reiterate, as our county executive mentioned, that vaccines.gov is the federally controlled website that helps people find not only COVID vaccines, but flu vaccines. You can search for either one. It will include both private sector vaccine availability as well as those participants who participate in the Bridge Access Program. That's the program that will ensure that adults who are not able to get insurance or their insurance doesn't fully cover the vaccination can go get a free vaccination. And the county plans to participate in that as well. We have not yet received notification on when we'll receive our vaccine, but we anticipate within the next week or so. And again, you can see when you search for flu vaccine, which is on the right here, you see how many different sites are available across the county. We imagine that within a few days, within a week or so, as those pharmacies, as those private clinicians receive their vaccine, you'll start to be able to see them populate, and you can search by the vaccine you want and the age group you want. Finally, we'll be updating our website with more information over the coming days, especially as we get notification of when we'll have vaccine and when we will open clinics for uninsured populations. Just a reminder, we still have rapid test kits and masks available at our libraries. Please check the library's website. They detail which sites currently have tests and masks, which sites are out. We are continuing to resupply, so there are some days when we have exhausted the supply, but we will resupply within a few days. And at this time, I'd like to see if our health officer, Dr. Davis, has any additional comments.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. No, nothing additional for me.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell and Dr. Davis. Members of the media, let's open it up right now for the public health questions and general questions. Please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Any questions? No questions? Going once? Twice? I guess it is goodbye for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a safe afternoon. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Mr. County Executive.